Hey, everybody, welcome back. I'm so excited to keep doing this. Writing a book can be a lonely experience, but it doesn't have to be. Surrounding yourself with fellow writers and authors can be what helps get you to the finish line. Connect with experts who can help you navigate the complexities of writing, editing, publishing, and marketing your business book, and you will realize that publishing is not the finish line. It's the latest time that you should start marketing your business book. I've created resources to help you find your author community and meet these experts. The Biz Book Publishing Hub has over 50 hub partners ready to help entrepreneurs become successful authors. This free resource is available at breakoutofboredom.com, which is also where you'll find out about the free hub community virtual networking events that I host throughout the year and the Biz Book Publishing Hub podcast, which is what you're listening to. And we feature interviews with hub partners and authors that are discussing the ROI of publishing a business book. Speaking of which, with me today, I have three authors. Helene Cahen is the author of Fire Up Innovation, Sparking and Sustaining Innovation Teams. She's also a publisher and one of the Biz Book Publishing Hub's founding partners. She's an innovation expert, passionate about helping others unlock their creative potential and tackle team challenges. Colbert is author of Think Like a Marketer, How a Shift in Mindset Can Change Everything for Your Business, an acclaimed marketing expert who provides actionable insights showing how adopting a marketing mindset can transform any business by enhancing customer connections and driving profitable growth. She's also one of our Biz Book Publishing Hub's founding partners. And Sandra Long, author of LinkedIn for Personal Branding, The Ultimate Guide, and co-author of Supercharge, Your Notary Business with LinkedIn, How Mobile Notaries and Loan Signing Agents Build Their Brand, Get Known, and Connect with Their Dream Clients. She's a LinkedIn expert, a LinkedIn top voice specializing in LinkedIn education, a thought leader, and also one of the founding hub partners. Please join me in welcoming Helene, Kate, and Sandra. Helene, I want to just kick things off here with you. I want to know, who did you write your book for? So just like the quick version, who was it that you had in mind that needed the book that you wrote?
So thank you for inviting me. I've been an innovation expert for 20 years, and I was really thinking about my client or potential client. And, as a consultant, you only have access to a few people when you consult. And so thinking about the other people that would benefit from the same approaches and the same understanding that innovation is not that hard, but you need to think about it as a different way than business as usual. And so I really wanted that to be my gift, kind of give back to what I learn and practice and help my client with to a broader audience of maybe smaller company or people that just want to kind of start thinking about it. And so that's really my audience, is kind of potential clients and broader organization that maybe don't have access to my services.
I really appreciate that. And Kate, you have a few different books out there with very different audiences. Tell us a little bit how you approached writing these books.
Yeah, so my debut book, which is 6 years old this week, Think Like a Marketer, was really written kind of to Helene's point about not everyone can be your client. You can't serve everyone, but what if you could take the best insights that you share with your clients and share that with a broader audience? And so that first book was really written to a broad audience of people, not who necessarily want to be marketers, but who own businesses or are sort of accidental marketers inside of their organizations who need to understand sort of a mindset shift of, how do I make better business decisions? And I had spent so many years of my career working with companies and organizations of all sizes and industries. And I used to sort of grumble, like I would walk away from my desk when somebody would do something really stupid. And I would think, if they would just think like a marketer, they wouldn't have made this mistake, or they wouldn't be distracted by this thing they wouldn't be building an app their customers don't need, or they wouldn't. And so it occurred to me, what if I figured out what those principles are that help me think like a marketer to help them think like marketers so that they can be more successful in their businesses. So I created what I think is a pretty practical conversational book for sort of the general business audience, especially business owners. The new book is called Commencement, the Beginning of a New Era in Higher Education. And that has a very niche audience, but pretty large. So it was written for the higher education industry. It was based on interviews with 125 college and university presidents. And it's all about the sort of evolutions and revolutions that are happening in higher education right now. And what in the world are we going to do about it if you work on behalf of or around higher education today? And so all of those executives who are running colleges and universities around the United States and around the world are the audience for that book.
Yeah, very clear audiences in both cases. Sandra, both your books, I should say all your books, you have like tips books out there as well. All your books are about LinkedIn. A lot of people write about LinkedIn. How did you carve out who specifically you're reaching out to when you were thinking about these books?
Well, my primary book, LinkedIn for Personal Branding, I really had the goal of combining the topics of LinkedIn and personal branding. In fact, I was very motivated because I wanted to be the first one to do that combination, write about that. And so I wrote that and I've updated my book. And the audience is really professionals and aspiring professionals. So students, grads, and then people who are in the professional world. And so I enjoy working with all of those folks. The Supercharge book is very niche. I wrote that with Bill Soroka. That's for notaries, and that's helping them use LinkedIn to supercharge their business using LinkedIn. And my newest book, Jumpstart Your LinkedIn Profile, is a tip book, and it's really just it's a shorter book. It's a smaller book. It's half the price, but it's very focused, very current on the latest tips on profile because things are always changing.
That's awesome. You know, I want to go back to you, Kate. I want to go back to you 6+ years ago when you're first getting started thinking about that book. And I want to know how you thought about success when you were writing that book. What metrics were you going to be paying attention to initially? Not what you know now, but what did you initially think was important and would make your book a success in your mind?
Yeah, it's fun to look back on it, right? So we learn so much along the way. Fortunately, as a marketer by trade, I think I had some pretty smart marketing sort of metrics going into it. I definitely wasn't the kind of author that just sort of wanted to hurry up, finish it, put it out with the trash before it starts to stink. It was, for me, it was really important to do it really well, really understand my audience. I actually sort of rewrote the whole thing when it was like 80% done, when I had a sort of breakthrough conversation with a client and she said, "What's your book about?" And the elevator speech I gave to that client said it more succinctly than the way that I said it in the book. And I realized I need to go back and sort of frame this entire conversation. For me, I really wanted the book to be career making for me. So I wanted my bio going forward to be author of, and for people to be like, "Oh, that's that book. I read it. And I really wanted it to tap into my expertise. I did want there to be some amount of success from a retail and bulk sales perspective. I wanted a lot of people to read the book. I mean, why else would you write a book? And I really wanted to start getting on more stages, doing more speaking. Robbie and I actually met at the National Speakers Association conference 6 years ago. So I wanted to get on more stages, and I wanted to start doing more consulting and coaching. So do less project work, but have more people say, "Hey, I read your book. I love the way you think. I would love to be inspired and to figure out how to have that mindset. Would you be willing to coach me?" And so landing more coaching gigs was really important. And I would say for the newer book, significantly and somewhat for that first book 6 years ago, I wrote a fake bio going into these adventures, and that my bio said what I wanted to be true and was not true. So it said things like, as featured on NPR, Forbes, Chronicle of Higher Education, NBC, ABC, CBS, Business Insider, et cetera. And none of those things were true 6 years ago. All of those things are true now. And so I went into it knowing that that's what I wanted to be able to achieve. I also wanted to write a book. I didn't know I was going to write two. I wanted to write a book that had staying power. And I would say that while my newest book, Commencement, is quite successful, think like a marketer 6 years later. Sometimes I had like week over week is sometimes actually outselling the new book, and the new book's doing really well. And so that was important to me, that this was not a flash in the pan, but that this was a book that 5, 10, 15 years later, people were still reading.
Yeah. That piece you just said about write the bio, the credibility bio that you want to have, and then use that as like your guiding, how do you move forward and what do you say yes to? I mean, that's really smart. I want to make sure to reiterate that for those who are listening. Helene, how did you think about those early aspirations when you were writing a book? Were you clear on, what piece of all this was going to make you feel like a successful author?
So, one of the things, I've been in the field of creativity and innovation for like over 20 years, but it's a field that there's a lot of buzzword around innovation, but a lot of people don't understand what it is. So my goal for myself is to help people understand innovation in a very concrete way, because I can talk about innovation for hours. It's not going to help you. So I wanted a book that had two things. One, it was anchored in theories and understanding. I have an MS in creativity and change leadership. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of tool book there. I don't want to be another tool book, because if you don't understand the principle, it's like if you build a house and you don't understand how to build a house, we can give you a hammer and a screwdriver, it's not going to build your house. So I wanted the people to understand the foundation and principle behind creativity and innovation, but also make it really practical. So each chapter has a practice that people do, because I think you learn about innovation by doing, not by reading. So I wanted to really balance those two aspects. And then the third thing is I learned that I am a visual thinker, and there's a lot of linear book, and I have a bookshelf of 200 books on creativity, but those are hard to read. So I wanted to also impact the fact that it's important to make it visually appealing, to have not only words, but graphics, visuals, tips, stories. So really a book that kind of reflect, if I'm in a room, this is what I bring to an audience. And I wanted the book to reflect who I am as a facilitator, expert, and trainer. So that was definitely a challenge, because you have workbooks and tool books, and then you have theory books. And I wanted to kind of merge both of them. And it all started like more than 20 years ago when I was doing my master, and I have a roommate, and we joke about how to make creativity sexy. And that was kind of what I have in the back of my mind, how to make it so the book is appealing, sexy, it's interesting, and then people want to dig into it and actually use it.
Yeah, thank you for that. I really appreciate it. Sandra, what about you?
Well, I wanted a book that had a lot of real live example, real people, and which I do have, and tables and charts. And I think, I had a vision of what I wanted it to be like physically, but as far as goals in terms of metrics of success, I wanted a book that I could use as a resource when people hired me, because I can only cover so much in a workshop, a training, a keynote, that the book was something that was a complement to what I was doing. So I wanted that on the one hand, but on the other hand, I definitely wanted to be found in Amazon search so that people could buy my book and then hire me. So it was kind of coming from both ends that I was looking to do.
You know what I find so interesting is that none of you talked about hitting #1 bestseller. And none of you talked about reviews, and we're going to talk about reviews in a little bit. But I love that you all had a real sense of the value you were putting into this, and that this was going to be a useful book. It was going to be a book that would stand the test of time and continue to be sold and appreciated and read, and like be having a big impact. I think we have to always start with that, because too often people are rushing, especially now. There's all these like write a book in a weekend, use AI to write a book, and it's just the garbage stuff that you're like. So writing a quality book with a specific audience in mind, I think it's a really key start. And it sounds like you all had a good head for that. I'm curious, because once you have a book and you start getting sales, you start getting reviews, you start landing new speaking opportunities. And Sandra and I also know each other through the National Speakers Association, one of many ways we crossed paths over the years. How did you start, Sandra? I'm going to come back to you. How did you start thinking about this definition of success? Did it evolve for you as, like, first of all, the first book no longer was new, and then as you created new books and new collaborations, what do you now think of as like hitting a high mark of success for the books that you have?
Yeah, I mean, I really look. There's three things. Obviously, I do look at reviews. I love to continually get new reviews. I do look at Amazon search, so I'll go in and check into Amazon. I'll put LinkedIn, and I want my books to be, among the top books. And the third thing is I definitely want quantity sales, and I do that with my clients. So I have clients that will buy, whether it's 100, 200, 300, or 50. Or 20, like I that's something that pretty much every single program, I'm going to say 95% of the time, my programs include books. And that's important to me.
And that's amazing, because that's may have been actually hard for you to know whether that would have worked before the book came out. It's not a metric you could have counted on, but as it started to happen, you're like, yes, more of that, please.
Yes.
So Helene, let me come to you. How has your definition of success, or what you think of as important, evolved now that your book's been out a little bit?
So I'm the newest author here because my book was just published last fall, so less than a year ago, and it's still work in progress because I didn't know. I never wrote a book, so I first, thought about my audience and the content, but to be honest, I didn't really think about what success looked like. And I think it's evolving. So the first thing that I wanted is get feedback, and great feedback. So one of the things I did actually when I wrote my draft of the book is I sent it to 10 or 15 people and asked them for feedback, because I had no idea. It's like, is it going to be appreciated or not? And I got great feedback. And that's really important, because I wanted a book that is not just to be a book on paper and a bestseller. I wanted a book that brings something to people. So I think it's still the first elements. And every time I see a new review on Amazon or somebody say, I just got your book, and this is really what is meaningful at the personal level. At the business level, it's definitely have a book as a kind of it's a business card in that sense. It's like, you have an offer, and people say, what do you do? Like, okay, and I can actually give you my book instead than just have a quick chit chat for 20 seconds. So that is really important, because I think it's an element of credibility and expertise. And I really put into that book what I learned for the past 25 years. So I'm proud of that. And then obviously is how do you use that to build more clients and build opportunities. And I've been on a lot of podcasts, and I really love talking about creativity and innovation. And definitely the book gave me those openings. Yeah. And now I'm really getting to the next space, which is how do I become, like you, more of a speaker, and how I use it for workshop and kind of leverage that as a kind of complement to the workshop I do. So
you get to take notes of what the other people on this panel have been doing. So they're great. They're great guys. They're a little ahead of you on this journey. Kate, that first book 6 years ago, you already had a marketing mind. So you probably had a different vision than a lot of first-time authors about what was possible regarding the book. But as the book became a reality and that was successful, it's almost like you climb one summit and you realize you're in a mountain range and there's other summits to climb. What became your new target? And then how did that inform your next book, and how you then recalibrated what success looked like out of the gate, which you wouldn't have dared dream of 6 years ago?
Yeah, it's fun. It's a fun question. Higher education was one of the industries I served when I wrote a book about marketing, right? So my book, Think Like a Marketer, is really for people who work in any industry. And if you come to any of the events I've held, around that book, it's everybody from rock stars who want to understand how to market themselves better, to people who are sales reps for multi-level marketing companies, to people who are, pharmaceutical sales executives, to, you name it, and lots of small business owners. But I really, really loved higher education, and I always have. And I've worked inside higher ed for many, many years before I started my own businesses. And I didn't know then, but that book created the opportunity for me to get out of the weeds. So to be able to write a book, and sort of to Sandra and Helene's points, that it's nice to be able to say to, when somebody says to you, hey, could I hire you to do this XYZ project? And maybe that project's too small for what you're doing now, which was kind of where I was headed, to be able to say, you should read my book. And I think it will help you do much of this on your own, right? So I Think Like a Marketer helped me sort of teach people to fish instead of me having to fish for them. And so, early on when I was writing that book, and I put a Post-it note on the wall in my office that said, "I am not your little mom and pop shop's marketing intern." Because I was tired of doing small projects for small businesses. I wanted to do big projects for big businesses. I wanted to do projects for multi-billion-dollar businesses, and universities with billion-dollar endowments. And that book helped me understand that I could step on bigger stages and I could sort of tell people, and I felt the guilt went away. So I used to feel guilty saying no to a small or medium-sized project. And now I can say, for $21, you can get thousands of dollars worth of advice from my book. And now I've helped you. And now I can go work on the clients I want to help. So that helped me really sort of skate to where my puck was going in terms of wanting to really go all in on higher education. And then when the opportunity came to partner up with a co-author who had just interviewed a zillion presidents of colleges and universities during the pandemic, and to write a book about the future of higher education, it allowed me to do something really second level. So I think, I had previously thought of, books that, sort of selling one-to-one, right? You get excited when some people, but, to Sandra's point, what does it look like when you can sell 50 books, 100 books, 300 books, custom edition books? We had a university just buy 400 copies for their faculty, and we had an ed tech company buy over 1,000 copies for their conference. We've had multiple conferences do them. And so what does that look like to do everything, but to do it bigger? And for me to really sort of move from that, to use some marketing lingo, to move from I wrote a book for an individual reader, to move from that business to consumer model, to move to that business to business model. How do I help Northeastern University succeed with the research and whatnot that I can do for them? And by the way, if they want to buy a couple hundred books, that's great too. But how does the fact that I wrote this book allow them to go all the way to their president to get approval for my big invoice? And so that has been really important. I think also I'm really now celebrating and measuring new kinds of collaborations that are coming my way. So not only am I getting on different stages, I didn't used to have university presidents calling me and saying, "Hey, we have a new interim CMO. We'd love you to coach her to get her ready for the offer." Or presidents calling me and saying, "I wonder if it would be fun if we started a podcast together," right? And so the opportunity to do big things and to create kind of to sort of a lens area of expertise, to get really innovative and creative and develop new things in the marketplace, those opportunities I don't think would have ever come my way, despite the fact that I was smart enough to do it, would never have landed in my lap had I not earned it through the success of both of these books.
Yeah, I mean, this is talk about like seeing new summits that you can climb. One of the pieces that I always check when an author gets pitched to, let's say, be on a podcast of mine or speak on a stage that I'm hosting or something like that, is I always glance at Amazon to see like what the reviews are like. And over the years, Amazon changed their sort of rules, and they allowed people to leave a review that was just a rating and not a written review. And that's the number that shows the top of the page. But I've learned you can dig a little bit, and within a second, you'll see how many written reviews there are. And I'm always astounded when I find someone out there who's talking about they have 200 reviews and they have less than 10 written reviews. The rest are all just the ratings. But you all, I want to say congratulations. This is the panel where every single person is over 20 reviews and way more than that. That minimum sort of review count of 20 I mentioned, though, because if you just hit publish and do nothing, you're probably not going to get more than 20. Like, to get more than 20 means you had to have some sort of process in place. And I want to actually go to Sandra, because I feel like all the work that you've done around your books really seems to have reviews next to it. And I know you were connected to Bill Soroka for one of them, and he's got a machine behind him. He's got a huge community, but that wasn't true for your first book. And your first book has 123 written reviews and 242 total ratings. And that book's been out a while. I mean, and there's still, by the way, I'm looking in their reviews that came in July and April of this year. So even though the book, is good, I mean, is it 2016 is the year of the book? Is that right?
That was the first version. And then in 2021, I updated it.
Yeah. So that's amazing that you've got reviews that are coming in, continuously coming in. How did you approach that initially? And were reviews part of your launch plan? Like, did you believe, all right, I really got to get this done, or did you fall into it later on, or how did it come
I
together?
really wasn't thinking it through completely at the time in 2016, but over time, it's now I have the benefit of this, those reviews when I updated the book, that many of them carried over. So I have that benefit of time that other books might not have. And one of the things, I get a lot of people that message me from all over the world, and they'll say, I'm reading your book and I want to connect on LinkedIn. One of the things, I even encourage them to send me a note on LinkedIn in my book. They usually tell me what they love about my book. And then oftentimes I'll say to them, great, I'm so glad you love my book. Would you mind copying and pasting exactly what you said in your message and put it in an Amazon review? And so most of the time that they're very happy to do that. And they'll say they'll do it. And I'd say, at least 50% of the time they will do it. So I encourage that. I don't ever stop thinking about it, which is probably not good, but if somebody likes my book, I ask them. I'm not
Even your
afraid
latest book,
to ask them.
yeah, you make it easy for them too. So you had a book that came out this year, the Tips book, May of 2024, and that one has over 50 written reviews.
Yeah.
And again, like out of the gate, like that's, now that you know how it works and how important it is, it feels like you're building it into the launch plan, whereas before
Yeah.
it kind of came into your experience.
Yes,
And you
I
started
learned from before, and so
Yeah.
yes, I was able to do that a little bit better up front.
Yeah. And then Kate, you also have sort of a marketing background. So I'm not surprised that your first book, it has 60 written reviews, 69 total ratings. Again, you've got to create a process or a machine of some kind to get over 50 reviews. Takes effort. Tell us a little bit about how you thought about it back then, or did this come as part of like a push or a relaunch after? And then how did it impact your thinking for the second book?
Yeah, so I have a kind of a unique perspective on reviews, I think. So as an avid Amazon shopper myself, I understand that very few people will buy something that doesn't have some reviews, right? And you better have more reviews than your direct competitor, right? And so do I need 1,000 reviews for either of my books if the next really good book that's similar to mine or has 900 reviews? Yes. Is there a book at all like mine? Or that's, so I always look at the competition to see if I was a customer and I was trying to decide between buying my book on higher education commencement versus Brian Rosenbook's book about, about sort of stagnation in higher education. Where does it matter? And so for me, it's always about having a really unique book. And if people can't tell the difference between two products, it helps to have more reviews. So in my case, I actually really haven't put much effort into it. It is like pulling teeth, if you can have a client or whatnot. Sandra makes a really great point. Just last week, a total stranger, posted a picture of commencement and said, this book is changing the way I think about higher education and the way I stand up and speak about it in meetings. And I'm so thrilled with this book. And I did exactly what Sandra does. And I actually publicly posted on LinkedIn, would you be willing to copy and paste that? And I gave her the link to where to go to put the review. And she did. And so there are ways to do that. I have found, though, in conversations with people who have told me they've loved my books, but who have not written reviews, that they don't know how to write a review. They're uncomfortable. I'm not a very good writer. They're afraid they'll look stupid if it's not articulate. And so so I think it's really important to know that, if somebody's got 50 reviews, they might have 5,000 readers. They've got 200 reviews, they might have 10,000 readers, so for me, it's not that big of a deal. Do I have review envy when I hear you talk about 200 and some reviews on Sandra's book? Yes, of course. Yeah, I did. Bring it on. I want all the reviews. It has not been a deliberate focus of mine. And it potentially could be. It would be interesting to do sort of a late in the game sort of push, which I know Robbie's really, really good at, and see what that does to sales and opportunities. It would be I'd be an interesting test case to sort of do that on post-launch to see how that turns out. But I would say I don't think it has I don't think having less than 100 has slowed me down in terms of my success metrics. But yeah, I would take more if I could get them.
They are so hard to get. And I really think I echo a lot of what you're saying, and especially that idea that you have to have more reviews than a competitor, that if there is such a thing in your book space. So like Sandra, for you, that probably makes sense that you made an effort, because there are other books on LinkedIn, not necessarily LinkedIn and personal branding, but people may not even realize that's the unique thing they need. And so the more you can have them read the description and kind of go, oh yeah, actually, I didn't need a generic LinkedIn book. I want this book. So it's helpful in that sense. I see it as social proof on your book sales page as people are considering whether to buy you, and also buy your book, and whether to hire you or whether to book you on a podcast, etc. Because again, like a lot of people just hit publish and they don't even have 20 written reviews. Like it's just the lack of effort is astounding to me. Between publication and marketing, there feels like there's this missing piece of getting your street team together, and which ideally, in the way I create the process, it has your referral partners, it has your prospects joining your launch team, which means as a business owner, we're talking to those folks, which leads to new business opportunities and new media opportunities. Helene, you have 39 reviews and 41 ratings. Again, out of the gate, you really a relatively new book, not even a year old. Clearly, you put effort into this. You were also part of this, Kindle Cross promotion, which we're all part of. And I'm curious, like, that helped obviously boost some book sales, but did you also see some reviews? And do you have a process you've been thinking about regarding reviews?
Yeah, so at the beginning, basically, when I launched my book, I made some ask and asked people to review, and I had a spreadsheet, and I follow up with people, and then after a while, I was like, it's hard for people to write, so I just did it, and then let it go. But to Kate's point is when people say something about, I really like your book, or I just always encourage them and send them the link as much as possible to make it easy. And also the other thing I suggest to people is you don't need to write a big review. Sometimes, because nobody want to read a big review either. If you have a couple of sentences that kind of a great summary, a great highlight in your book, it might be as useful or no more useful to a reader than a huge paragraph when it's like, I don't want to read 40 lines of something. So, and I think that really helps. Some people overcome, they're like, oh, okay, I just can put a couple of highlights. I don't need to put everything. So that's also, I just try to make it as simple as possible for
Ellen,
people.
I appreciate that. So in all of my books, I have a page in the back that asks for a review, and I put prompts. These are the same prompts that I use when I'm working with a client, or if people join my online program to go through my launch process. And for a business book, like the ones that we all have, they're pretty generic. So you can tweak them a little bit, but essentially I say you don't have to read the whole book or write a whole book report. You just have to answer at least 2 of these prompts. And the minimum prompts I give are 3. So one is, what is a takeaway or aha that you had from this book? The second one is, what are you doing differently because you read this book? And the third is, who should read this book? Like, what kind of person, give some characteristics to the kind of person that would benefit from reading this book. And a sentence for 2 of those would be not just a review, but a helpful review. And I always tell people, like, it doesn't need to be a 5-star, but if it's not, can you give some context so someone else would know why it didn't work for them and who else it might be better for? I had someone not love my second book as much as my first, but my second book was geared towards entrepreneurial women in their 50s and beyond. And he was none of those things. So I was like, can you just give some context? And then it's helpful because his review not being a 5-star meant that probably more people read it, but it ended up being a useful review for people to kind of glance at and go, oh, this is a good book. For me, I would love this book. And then it helps with sales. And so I do think we have to kind of guide people through that process. And I do a whole thing where we collect reviews in advance. They're not staring at that white little box, wondering what to type. They can review it, fix their typos, all that good stuff before they actually hit publish. But reviews are not the only hard thing when it comes to launching a book. I'm curious if any of you will give me a wave if you have a particularly juicy challenge that you had to overcome to get that first book written. When you think back to the first time you're writing a book, for the two of you who have more than one, is there something that you had to kind of get over or through in order to get to the point where you had a book in your hand? I'm gonna call in Sandra and then Kate.
Well, I think the challenge I face continually is that LinkedIn is changing all the time. So I have to always be thinking about how am I stating this and positioning it so that it can be a little more evergreen, right? If it's all just, do this, do that, that's not going to be helpful. I mean, I definitely have specific examples, but I try to make it more strategic. That's why the personal branding is so important, but it's also there's strategy in there about thought leadership and content that will be, more long lasting than just how to do X, Y, and Z. So I had
the same issue for my third book, which is about Zoom. And while I was writing it, Zoom kept changing where the buttons were for things that I was doing.
It's a constant thing. So you have to really think about making it more evergreen.
Yes, and like you, I made that a lot about the strategy and theory, and that way it was applicable even if you were using Teams, heaven forbid. Instead of Zoom, you could still use a lot of that same ideas. So Kate, what was the challenge that you had to overcome?
I think I want to share one that I think is probably universal for all writers, especially new authors, was finding the time. So I was running a very successful business, as many people are when they write a book. And I thought, how do I take time away from my clients and all the other things I've promised people to do this thing for me? Which ultimately was a gift to all the people who are going to read it. But how do I do this thing and carve out time for it? And so I did something that has become really I'm sort of known for this, and a lot of my clients do it now too. So I started going into what I called writer's exile, and I spent a boatload of money on a local hotel. And so there's a hotel that's like a 3-minute drive from my house. And so I would load up all my stuff and my, Post-it notes and all the things, right? And snacks and whatnot. And I would check into a hotel. Now hotels are jerks in terms of if you want to check in at 9 a.m, most of them won't let you, till the afternoon. That's problematic. And so that was really tricky for me. And so sometimes I would have really narrow windows. Like I would get there at 3 and I was going to work from 3 p.m. till 10 o'clock at night, maybe come back in the morning for a couple hours before checkout in the morning. But I had this really narrow window. And I've paid $160 for this hotel room and I am going to work. And if somebody pings me on my phone, I'm not paying attention to, I'm not doing anything. And no, I'm not going to take a nap on the bed, even though it looks really inviting to do. And so for me, it was unbelievable, the kind of deep work, to borrow a phrase from Cal Newport, that I was able to do. And I would go, once or twice a week for several weeks in a row. And then I also wrote large portions of both of my books on cruise ships. And so for me, being able to sort of sit there in the Caribbean while everyone else is off having fun and you're just sort of staring at the beach and writing was really actually very helpful for me. So investing in creating a writing space that was really different and that wasn't in my office and that didn't have my normal distractions. And again, holding myself accountable, because if you're spending money, like if you had to pay extra rent for the desk you're sitting at, which is what I was doing, you'll get the work done. And that for me, that was how I held my own feet to the fire.
It's so hard for me. I didn't identify as a writer when I started with my first book in I started probably thinking about the book in 2015, 16. It finally came out in 2017. I still don't really identify as a writer. Multiple books, write a weekly email and all that. It's just not the medium I would go to first. And so I had a lot of I think mental hangups also about approaching writing. But then, like you said, you come up with the ways around that. You find ways to make the work for you. And it stops being as daunting. Plus, past success makes that easier, which is why I think people who write one book tend to write a second. I mean, it's you don't plan to, but you've gone through a lot. You've learned a lot. You might as well.
But we should do a seminar on that, Robbie. Because writing books for me is sort of easy because I'm a professional writer. That's what I do for a living. But that's a really great point. So many people have a deep area of functional expertise or a really brilliant concept or a really interesting story to tell, but they are not writers by trade. What a huge thing to take on to write a book when you're not a writer. And that would be a really interesting thing to think about for people like me who I used to be an English professor at the collegiate level. So I've taught a lot of people how to write. What would it look like to help business people, really sort of get through that mental hurdle? So I think so my hat's off to, like everyone who does not see themselves as a writer, who sits down and does the amazing, beautiful sort of gift work of creating a book for other people. That is no small matter.
Kate doesn't need another job, but we could easily create one for you. I'm curious, giving a wave, if you have a story about a really effective marketing strategy that led to more book sales. I want to already acknowledge that selling bulk sales of books with speaking engagements and consulting contracts, let's already name that as one of them. That's fantastic. Is there something else that you maybe wouldn't have thought of ahead of time and it just happened that you ended up selling lots of books because of it? All right, I'm going to go back to Kate.
So ironically, there's a chapter in Think Like a Marketer called Give It Away, and it's all about sampling strategies for any industry. And so, in the grocery store, you get to taste a bagel bite, but even as a professional who provides services, there are ways to sample your services. And when my most recent book, Commencement, came out, we wanted to give it away, which is really an expensive thing to do. And I want to share this story. So Commencement is over 500 pages long. So when the higher education reporter at Forbes wrote a piece about it, he said that when he received his copy in the mail, he thought an angry reader had sent him a brick, right? So, which is, by the way, the opening line of my keynote speech. but we knew it was going to cost us a lot of money to give books away. But 125 college and university presidents were interviewed for our book. It was their book too. And so my co-author and I, not only did we both autograph, and we were living in separate states, so we were mailing blank name plates back and forth and autographing them by hand. And then we put tape flags. This was no small matter. My husband, my mom, myself spent 4 weekends in a row going through, and every single time a person is mentioned in our book, we flagged it for them so that they could jump to those pages. And we have some people who were mentioned dozens of times, and we had custom sort of signatures, and we mailed. And then any president who we knew who was just named to a presidency but had nothing to do with our book, we mailed them one and said, we thought you might find that it helps fast track your success by hearing from your peers at other colleges and universities. And then, so we sent out, I would say, a little over 200 autographed, custom flagged books to VIPs, and we didn't ask them for anything. And as a result, everybody went crazy and went and took pictures with the book with the tape flags in front of this university seal at their desk. Some people had their university photographer come take a nice photo of them with the book, and they just went nuts on LinkedIn. And suddenly people were like, wow, all the college and university presidents in the United States are reading this book about the future of higher education. Maybe I should read it. And so we gave away thousands and thousands of dollars worth of books and spent a lot of money on freight. We hit ROI on that really fast. So sometimes you have to I made the mistake with my first book thinking make your mama buy it. Don't ever give away a book, right? But ultimately, you shouldn't give it to somebody who's not going to help you promote your business. But if there's somebody, for whom, if people say, well, Robbie Samuel says this is a great book, and then that's going to sell 300 more copies, then you should give Robbie a free copy, right? And so that was, for us, we were really deliberate about, if we put this book in whose hands, it will accelerate sales for us.
That's a really creative question. I feel like I'm going to start asking my authors as we're talking about their launch, because a lot of times they're still thinking about the sale one-to-one, one at a time. And I'm like, ooh, that's not the way for us to be thinking about yes, for the launch, as far as get launch team members and get the reviews. But even the people you're inviting on the launch team should be the people who would then get you in front of the wider audience that you're looking for, whether they're going to buy the book or invite you to speak or whatever it is. So what a creative investment of energy, time, and money, but it paid off for you. So that's brilliant. And it also is a good example of a pipeline between your book and other business that you could sell beyond the book, that you had this idea of like, really clear consulting offer, speaking opportunities that could come from that. And that's actually, Helene, I want to come back to you. As you were thinking about this book, how clear was the pipeline from a reader is reading your book and being like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And then what's the next thing they could buy from you? Like, was there lead magnets in the book that people could opt in to get bonus content? Was there an email in the book that people could reach out to you, or like Sandra mentioned, a LinkedIn or something? Like how are you directing people? And in your mind, what was that pathway?
So one thing I wanted to do with that book is to be as interactive as possible. So one thing I did is at the end of the book, there's a QR code and there's journals in the book, the practice. And so with a QR code, they can download their journal. So if they want to write it, because people don't like to write in books. So they could create their own journal and write it. So that was one of the way to kind of keep going beyond just the physical book to at the next level. And then the other thing I have, and it's not very maybe creative strategy, but is trying to really create dialogue. So I have a newsletter that I put, and it's all about how I can help you think about innovation. I spend an hour or two every day to kind of scan if everything's happening in innovation. So this is what I want to bring is like, if you're interested in this topic, I'm going to help you from what I learn and what I see, and kind of diffuse the information. So that's what I do on LinkedIn. That's what I do in my newsletter. So I try to be kind of consistent in kind of bringing this expertise and this knowledge and help people learn on their journey, whether they decide to work with me personally or not. But this is my, I feel like I invest more than 20 years of my life in that topic, and I just want to share that knowledge. So I don't believe that. I think that, back to the point of giving free, bring free knowledge, and it's kind of spread the good. And we need a lot of innovation in this world for a lot of reasons. So I'm all for whatever help with innovation. I'm all in support of that.
This makes me think of two reasons I love having a book. I mean, one, it helps me say less from the stage. Mm-hmm. Before I had a book on networking, which is the topic of my first book, I would speak for 2 hours, and I was like, I have 3 days of content. I could keep going. The lights are still on. Let's do this. And now it's like, I've spoken about, let's say, Zoom, which is my topic of my third book. And sometimes I don't have that much time. I have to just give like the highlights, but I feel like I can, because I could just keep directing people back to the book for more detail. So I can just come in with like 3 sort of high level new ways to think about a thing, but not spend any time during that Zoom call actually doing any of the training as far as like click these buttons. It's just getting to think a little differently. And then I'm like, oh, and if now you can go look this up, or you can just read my book. But that's one reason. And the other is a lot of what Helene was just saying. It's like educating your readers makes them better prospects. They understand now more of the problem that they have, that they could hire you for, which is part of this process of writing a book. Sandra, it feels like you've got things to add here around like the dotted line between you writing this book and then people coming to you because they need to hire you in some way. Like, how have you started to conceive of that?
Well, it's usually around the bulk sales. So I had a college, actually a university business school, reach out to me in July wanting to buy my book, my new book, to give for students and staff. And so they just were asking me for just the book sales. And I was able to turn that into a conversation. So we ended up selling them a few hundred books plus doing workshops. So it was able to just, it's really trying to have conversations with people, if they're looking for books or they're looking for workshops, having those conversations to kind of enhance whatever we're talking about. And they're thinking about one thing or the other. They're thinking about books, or they're thinking about a program. So it's our job to kind of bring that together. And there's a lot of opportunities to do that. I also created a little quantity book price sheet to make it easy for people to order. So I don't have to, wonder what I'm going to charge or anything like that. If they're interested in quantity books, I have that, and I have the benefits of the book, and I have They can actually just sign it without a PO, and they can just pay on their credit card. I made it super easy for them to buy 50, 100, 200, 300 books with the quantity prices listed. More books is a better price. So I just made it really easy. But I do want those conversations, because the conversations lead to the bigger opportunities.
That makes so much sense. I actually set up emails that are on the front of the book on the copyright page that has a little note like for bulk orders, and it was like bulk book at whatever the name of the book was or something like that. And part of it was also working hard to make this not look like I was the only person in the shop, writing the book, packaging the book, and shipping the book. But, it also was to point out that you can do that. Like bulk orders are invited and welcomed. And I love the idea of a price sheet. That's really cool. Mm-hmm. In a moment, we're going to go to my favorite question. And first, we're going to have a quick word from our sponsor. And by the way, the question is going to go Helene, and then Kate, and then Sandra. And the question is, what advice would you give someone writing a book that would help them grow their business? But first, a quick word from our sponsor. All right, Helene, what advice would you give to someone writing a book to help them grow their business?
Well, I think, as you so focus on writing the book and making the deadline and getting it published, you sometimes forget to really focus on and then what. So I would really do both at the same time. As you're writing the book, also think about the marketing and how you're going to build your business and things like that. So it's kind of the timing. I know when I published my book, I redid my website, I renamed my business, I rebrand, so I did all of this at the same time. But if I had thought about it a year before, because it took me like 2.5 years really from the book to starting to publishing, I think I would have been much better off. I feel like I was scrambling with the launch and the website and the rebranding and the communication. So that would be definitely something I would recommend to think as you write the book. Also think about all the marketing.
It's so hard because I know this from my first book, that the deadline of the publication date of getting everything done by that date was the thing I was so focused on. But then I had that epiphany, wait, this is a good book. I want people to read it. And then I was thinking about marketing, and happens I love marketing. So that part of my brain was very happy to dig into and do. But I think you're right. Like this is why I love, by the way, having hub partners, like these Biz Book Publishing Hub partners are all these experts that can ask the right questions at the beginning of the author journey. So the author writes the right kind of book, gets the right kind of support, starts thinking about how is this going to impact my business. I think when you're by yourself is maybe when it's the hardest, when you don't have a community of other authors, even just to ask or just to help you see what's around the corner. So I'm thrilled that we're creating all these opportunities for people to listen in to this panel, come to our community events, etc. Kate, what advice would you share with someone who is writing a book to help them grow their business?
I think you have to let it change you. So there's a big difference between being somebody who wrote a book. I can walk into a certain rooms and just sort of point at like, they wrote a book, they wrote a book, they wrote a book. There's a difference between being somebody who wrote a book and being an author. And being an author really is an identity change. It widens you, it broadens you, it enriches you, and it changes the way you think about yourself. Like you should have a different bio. Your LinkedIn profile sure as heck better look different and better have a publications section where people can click just to go buy the book, right? It should change you. It should not just be another project that gets put in a folder, put on a shelf. And so, my advice is really ask yourself, are you willing to do all the things that it takes to be a successful author? Anybody can write a book, but being a successful author requires really, really thinking about your brand, really writing, editing, designing, publishing a really stellar book. And you might need to do good research for that book. There should be a lot that goes into it. And then, step one is write it. Step two is market it for the rest of your life. And of course, people will expect me to say that as a marketer, but I think even if I wasn't a marketer, I would be telling you, you have to be marketing it for the rest of your life. Your book is your baby, right? And you wouldn't go through a pregnancy, an adoption process, a surrogacy, et cetera, and not, as you're waiting, be sort of decorating and building out the nursery, right? So get that marketing started along the way while you're writing. And you would also not have that child and not be thinking about their future. And so, I think that it's really important to realize that when you create something as important as a book, you owe it to that book to take good care of it for the rest of its life. And so it really is, I always tell people, don't do this if you're not going to do it well, because you'll actually feel like a bigger failure if you do it poorly than if you never wrote the book in the first place. And so let it change you, and be willing to jettison portions of your business, your career, your identity to make space for what it means to be an author and to be that new person and resource to the people that you are now going to serve as an author. Creating space for it can be hard, but if you're open to it, it can be career defining and it can be life changing.
I love this. Like, clearly people do talk about book baby, right? Like it's their book baby. Don't do it unless you're ready to actually commit to the life of this baby. Sandra Long, what advice would you share? And also, how can people contact you to follow you in your work?
Great. Well, my big advice is figuring out who the people are in your world that can help you. So that and really, like, you can use some of the great contacts that you have for quotations, for feedback, for testimonials, for leads, for referrals, like thinking through your entire network in terms of how exactly all the different places where you can get help, because doing it alone is hard. I mean, I'm a big believer in self-publishing, but you still need a team. You need to have people. And some of those are friends or colleagues or partners that will just do it as part of being a wonderful professional. And then there's other people you probably need to hire to help get it done, but thinking through all the people that can help you get where you want to go.
I love that. I mean, when I'm building launch teams with my clients, they're amazed that they end up with like 700 people on their invite list and 400 plus people say yes to being on the launch team. And they had no idea that network existed, but that's untapped. So, Sandra, how can people find you and follow your work?
Oh, so definitely LinkedIn is my best place. It's Sandra Long, and I'm in the Boston area. If you put in Sandra Long Boston or Sandra Long LinkedIn, you'll find me. You can also find me on Amazon. So I look forward to it.
Brilliant. Helene, how can people find you and follow your work?
Yeah, so LinkedIn, obviously. And it's Fire, and my business is fireupinnovation.com. So
great. By the way, we're going to put all these links in the show notes at bizbookpublishinghub.com. Kate, how can people find you and follow your work?
Well, you can definitely find me on Amazon, and Think Like a Marketer has a whole chapter on how to write a book and let it change your business. So you can find me there simply at Kate Colbert. More on the book at thinklikeamarketerthebook.com, and on the higher education book at commencementthebook.com. And you can find me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/in/Kate Colbert.
Brilliant. We're going to put all these links in the show notes at bizbookpublishinghub.com. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.